So after a nice weekend of the pre-release and seeing some of the new cards in action, I have a question for Wizards of the Coast. Why was the Precon for Most Wanted white, red, and black? Well, I'm going to try to answer that question today and present a deck list, which I think the color combination should have been for that Precon. So let's get down into it. So what brought along this little bit of introspection? Well, it's a card I opened at the pre-release and played with, and you're going to see it right here on the screen. This is Double Down. For 3 and a blue. It's an enchantment. Whenever you cast an outlaw spell, copy that spell. This card is freaking amazing. Every time I dropped this thing in limited, I won the game because I had enough outlaws, and every outlaw I cast, it doubled it up. So you got to play with it. So I'm like, okay, if you're going to make a card that cares about outlaws, why wouldn't you make it so you could slot it into the Precon you just sold everybody that is around outlaws? Well, there's a couple of reasons that I've kind of guessed at. One is they didn't want to have blue mana in 3 out of the 4 Precons, because if they would have made this one black, red, blue, then we would have had white in 1 Precon and blue in 3 of them. So there's one problem. The other reason I think is because they already had 2 legends coming in the new set that are red, black, and blue with Marquesa and Obeka, and they didn't want to have them kind of, being pushed aside for the Precon commanders. So that said, I think they made a major mistake not making this Precon red, black, and blue instead. So let's take a look here a little closer at Olivia and Vihan and kind of figure out why they added white to this deck in the first place. So I said, I want to take a look at the 2 commanders. First off, let's look at Olivia. Why does she need to be white? Treasure creation is mostly a red thing, sometimes black, sometimes white, but blue has it as well as their kind of 3rd level thing. +1/+1 counters sometimes come in black and blue, so it's not exclusive to her needing to be white for that either. And with Vihan, you could have just replaced the vigilance keyword on there with a different keyword, and it would have fit just fine having blue on it. So going over the main set of cards that are an outlaw or cares about an outlaw creature type in white from the main set, there are 8. That's it. In the Precon itself, there's 1 new card that is an outlaw and it is white. So between the new set and the Precons, there are 9 cards that have white in their color identity and support the outlaw ability that you could slot into the Precon, and you could maybe stretch it out a little bit more if you include a couple of cards that create outlaw tokens, but are not outlaws themselves. In the meanwhile, blue has 18 outlaws or outlaws matter cards in the main set, and then 3 more in the Precons that would be playable in the deck if it were red, black, and blue, making more than double the amount of cards available from the new set compared to white. Now, if you go back and look at the history of Magic and all the past sets, and you look up white cards that are compared to these outlaw creature types, we have a grand total of 46 cards available to us that we could use in the deck as its original form is, with red, black, and white in the deck. That's it. And some of them are so bad, I would never consider playing them in the first place. On the flip side, if you look at red, black, and blue outlaws from the past, and this includes the Outlaws of Thunder Junction cards, there are over 250 cards that you could slot into this deck and have them, help assist with whatever the plan is as outlaws. That's a staggering difference. Now, that's not to say that all of those cards are playable. I'm going to put some on the screen that are very much not playable. However, even if you were to cut in half the amount of cards that you could look up and put in this deck, that's still over 100 cards, more than double what's available in white, to go ahead and try to put in this deck if it had blue in it instead of white. Now, the final thing I want to talk about is this kind of rubs me wrong with how this Precon was constructed. I got to sit down on Friday night after the pre-release watching somebody play the Precon Most Wanted in person, so I got to see the deck operate right up close. And I cannot figure out why they bothered with white in the deck. It barely has anything in it that's white. White really doesn't matter in the deck. And on top of that, it's like the way they constructed Olivia and the way they constructed Vihan, they're not outlaw commanders. They're treasure commanders. They don't care about really the outlaw type. You could replace their creature type triggers to anything. You could make Olivia say vampires. You could have Vihan say, I don't know, dwarves, and it wouldn't matter. You would still get the triggers or turn them into these things, but they don't care about outlaws really. They care about treasures, because they don't really do anything if you don't have treasures on the board or have treasure creators making treasures turn after turn. So aren't really outlaw commanders, so I don't understand why they even bothered. So instead, I'm going to present to you a deck that I think they should have made as the Precon, and it's going to be built at a Precon power level. So let's take a look now at what I have built for you, which is Marquesa, Dealer of Death. So Marquesa, Dealer of Death, for a blue, a black, and a red, you get a human rogue that says whenever you commit a crime, pay 1, and if you do, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put 1 in your hand, 1 into your graveyard, and it's a 3/4. So commit a crime is basically you target anything that they have on their board, themselves, their graveyard, or their creatures, and you have committed a crime, and then you can pay 1 and do this ability. So here we have an outlaw that plays into the commit a crime mechanic, giving us options for card selection off of the crimes we commit, as well as blue in the color identity, so we can gain access to many more outlaws for our deck. We also gain access to the creature type changing enchantments and artifacts that we could use to change our outlaws to all the outlaw types, so we can gain bonuses off of each other for the various types in the deck. For the rest of the video, I'm going to go ahead and talk about cards that we're adding to this thing that couldn't be added without switching it to blue, and I'm going to carry over a fair chunk of cards from the Precon, and you can see those in the deck list. So of course, the first is the inspiration for this video. Double down, 3 in a blue enchantment. Whenever you cast an outlaw spell, copy that spell. This thing is stupidly powerful, and if you're able to cast off into it, you're going to be able to make an impressive army off of it, and you're not just settling for one of them though. We're going to go ahead and add some copy enchantment and mirror made into the mix, so we can copy double down and some of our other enchantments in the deck. These 2 cards are basically the same thing. Each of these enter the battlefield, and they can come in as a copy of whatever you're copying. Double down is not legendary, so you can get 2 copies of double down, and everything you cast into it then is doubled twice. It's just a good way to assist us in our criminal pursuits. And there's other enchantments that we could copy as well in this, such as at knife point from the new set. 1, a black and a red enchantment. As long as it's your turn, outlaws you control have first strike, and whenever you commit a crime, create a 1/1 red mercenary token, and it only triggers once per turn. Having a repeatable way to create a token each turn is great, and it can add up over time. Everyone I've seen use this thing did great things with it, and we're going to have many more repeatable ways of committing crimes in Commander than what you would see in Limited. The static part of the enchantment doesn't really matter if we copy it, like I was talking about those copy enchantments, but we can get multiple copies of the trigger off of it to create these things as we do crimes. Another great card in the deck is Rakish Crew. For 2 and a black enchantment, when it enters the battlefield, create a red mercenary token, and then whenever an outlaw you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life, you gain 1 life. This is Bastion of Remembrance for outlaws, and I can verify that it is a very good card in a deck full of outlaws because I ran it this weekend in the limited format, and it's just a great target for copying enchantments. Another card that I opened but I did not actually play in my deck is Rakdos Joins Up. For 3, a black and a red. It's a legendary enchantment that when it enters the battlefield, return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it. And whenever a legendary creature you control dies, it deals damage equal to the creature's power to target opponent. It's a nice recovery tool that can punish our opponents for getting a little too removal happy, and copying it will let you recover an additional creature, but you only get to keep 1 of the enchantments when you do that. So moving off the enchantments for now, let's dig into the main set for some more goodies for this deck, starting off with Boneyard Desecrator. 3 in a black, zombie mercenary with menace. 1 in a black, sack another creature, put a +1/+1 counter on the Desecrator, and if it was an outlaw sacrificed, you create a treasure token. An outlaw that can combine with the captivating crew that comes with the Precon. You steal your opponent's stuff, you feed them into the Desecrator, or if another outlaw is going to die to a removal spell or in combat, you just pay and feed the Desecrator, pump it up, make a treasure. Lots of good things going for this particular mercenary. I also wanted to include some kind of clone in this deck for a few of the cards in it, so let's take a look at Visage Bandit. For 3 and a blue, it's a shapeshifter rogue. You may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature you control, except for it is a shapeshifter rogue in addition to its other types, and you can plot it for 2 and a blue, and it's a 2/2 to start off with. So this is an outlaw clone that we can plot and set aside until later in the game, and fits the bill as a clone I wanted to include in the deck, so it fits the theme of the deck as well, so I thought it would be a great card to have in here. Speaking of great cards with this deck, let's take a look at Hellspur Posse Boss. For 2 red lizard rogue. Other outlaws you control have haste, and when it enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 red mercenary creature tokens with their tap ability. One of the few outlaw lords that come with this set. It grants all of our outlaws haste and a pair of outlaws to either tap and pump something up immediately or swing at our opponents. Then we have a card that was extremely messed up in Limited, and I think it's going to do fun things in Commander, and that is Laughing Jasper Flint. For 1, a black and red lizard rogue. Creatures you control but don't own are mercenaries in addition to their other types. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top X cards of target opponent's library, where X is the number of outlaws you control. Until end of turn, you can cast those spells and pay any type of mana to cast those spells, and it's a 4/3. We already have our own gang of outlaws to start stealing our opponent's spells, but stealing their creatures will net us even more outlaws to work with, and this works hand in hand with the inclusion of Rakdos the Muscle. For 2 black, red, you get a Demon Mercenary with Flying and Trample. It's a 6/5 that says whenever you sacrifice another creature, exile cards equal to the mana value from the top of target player's library. Until your next end step, you may play those cards and pay mana of any kind to cast the spells, and you can sack another creature to give him indestructible until end of turn and tap him, but you can only do this once per turn. So Rakdos does some silly stuff for us. We can swipe key spells from our opponents, and we can chain feed creatures we steal to keep stealing more and more cards. It gives us a free sack each turn. So maybe you can use like Captivating Crew to steal their biggest threat, feed it to Rakdos, exile a bunch of cards, and then try to cast. Or otherwise, you're just going to get rid of them for the rest of the game and just kind of slowly mill them down. But take note, both Rakdos and Laughing Jasper's Flint have targeting abilities attached to them. Therefore, they commit a crime for any of our commit a crime cards, such as my next choice for the deck, Gissa the Hellraiser for 3 black, human warlock with ward 2 and pay 2 life to target it. Skeletons and zombies you control get +1/+1 and have menace, and whenever you commit a crime, create 2 tapped 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature tokens. The ability triggers once each turn. So the big thing here is the crime trigger. It allows us to get zombie rogues for more outlaw action, but being a repeatable thing is really good and help us overwhelm our opponents with our outlaws and feeds into our commit a crime side theme of the deck. And something that synergizes with that commit a crime and the repeatable outlaw tokens off of her is Vile Smasher Gleeful Grenadier. For a black and a red, it's a 3/2 legendary creature goblin mercenary that says whenever another outlaw enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to target opponent. So, Vile Smasher doesn't care about cast. It only cares about that an outlaw hits the board. So any mercenary tokens, any zombie rogue tokens, anything that we reanimate, any of the outlaws that we're playing, this will trigger the goblin, and those little pings are crime triggers that can add up over time, especially when combined with a little Aristocrats package that I'm going to add to the deck. And this series of cards starts with Grima Wormtongue, Blood Artist, Falcon Wrath Noble, Judith the Scourge Diva, Goblin Bombardment, Mayhem Devil, Sanguinary Priest, and Street Urchin. Drains and sacrifice engines for the deck. This is how we're going to supplement Rakish Crew's death triggers, but we're also allowing ourselves several ways to commit crimes to get those triggers as well. And many of these can be done off turn, so you can get multiple triggers per turn cycle for things like Gissa or at knife point. But those creatures in the package are not outlaws, so we're going to include Arcane Adaptation and Maxwood Nexus. This will make our non-outlaws into outlaws, which then can be doubled by double down when they are cast, and allows us to get other benefits off of creatures that they look at the creature type and go, okay, this benefits this. Now let's swerve back to some outlaws not from the new set that we can include in our build, such as Anawan the Ruin Thief, Corpse Appraiser, Demir's Strandcatcher, Cridle of Baldur's Gate, and Marquesa's Smuggler. Some card draw, some graveyard hate, some unblockability, all on theme with the deck and adding to our outlaw count. I added Anawan because most of the outlaws in the build are actually rogues, including Marquesa, and the creature type altering enchantments and artifact here can make all of our creatures into rogues to get the benefit off of him. And then the last bit of the deck I'm going to include that helps us here is a reanimation package, because we're going to be pitching cards off of Marquesa's triggers with her committing crimes, things are going to die, all that good stuff, and we're going to be sacking things. So we have things like Archpriest of Shadows, Body Launderer, Dread Return, Oversold Cemetery, and the Cruelty of Gix. All these things help us, 2 of which actually are outlaws for us to actually work with here, and these will join Rakdos Joins Up as ways to get creatures back that we've kicked into the graveyard or have died over the course of the game. And it just gives us more things to work with, and I really think this is the way this deck should have been built. So what did you guys think of my analysis of why I think they should have made this a red, black, blue deck instead of what they did with the Precon? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed what I'm doing here, please like, share, comment, subscribe. All those things help my channel grow as we're on the road to my first 1,000 subscribers. And as always, thank you for watching. Have a great day, and we will see you in the next video.